You're listening to This is Yoga Therapy. I'm your host, Michelle Lawrence, and I've had the opportunity to interview many of those who are making a difference at the intersections of yoga and health. And I'm here to share with you their stories and conversations. Thanks for listening. Well, here we are, and it's a pleasure to take the time to talk with you again, Joseph. And in today's episode, I interviewed Joseph LePage again. And as many of you know, Joseph founded Integrative Yoga and Integrative Yoga Therapy in 1993. And he's a pioneer in the field of yoga therapy training programs. He began teaching yoga therapy in hospital settings in 1995 and continues up to the present as director of the Healthy Heart Program, which conducts yoga therapy group programs in public health settings throughout Brazil, where he lives. Joseph's been a speaker at major conferences, including Yoga Journal, the International Association of Yoga Therapists, the Kripalu Yoga Teachers Association, the International Association of Yoga and Ayurveda, and others. And recently, Joseph has received the title of Yoga Chikitsa Ratna, or Jewel of Yoga Therapy, from the Indian Yoga Association in 2024 for his service to humanity. And that's quite an honor. He's the co-founder and director of the Enchanted Mountain Yoga Center in Garopaba, Brazil, one of the largest yoga and retreat centers in South America. He's the co-author of the book Yoga Toolbox for Teachers and Students, which is one of the most widely used materials in teacher training programs in the US and Brazil. And it's published by Integrative Yoga. And he's also co-author of my favorite book, Mudras for Healing and Transformation, which was also published by Integrative Yoga. So during the podcast today, we're going to talk more about the Healthy Heart Program and Joseph's work teaching yoga therapy in hospital and healthcare systems. And again, Joseph, it's so great to speak with you, and it's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
So let's start just by getting a little update. How are things at the Enchanted Mountain in Brazil today? What's happening there?
Busy. We're in the middle of a teacher training program. So this is a teacher training. We've been open here in Brazil for 22 years. So we've been doing this teacher training program for over 20 years. And now this is a month long. And so we now have two formats. We have this month-long format. And of course, getting in line with the latest trends, we also have an online program, which is 1 week and then 8 months online, and then followed by another week. But in this residential format, what we see is that part of yoga is information, but so much of yoga is knowledge, and so much of yoga is process, and so much is process of transformation. And that's something that you can get the tools for that online, but when people come to the residential, then it's something that they receive directly. So they're in the middle of it.
That's great. I'm jealous. But I look forward to coming back down to Enchanted Mountain next spring. Yeah.
We'll be here.
Yes. So in a couple of weeks, you and I, so Inner Peace Yoga Therapy and Joseph LePage, are gearing up to offer a course called Yoga in Healthcare. And this course evolved out of the Healthy Heart certification program, which was born out of your work in yoga, bringing yoga to hospital and healthcare settings. So maybe you can just tell us how the Healthy Heart program began originally. Give us a little background and history.
Well, I started teaching in hospitals back in California. And so the first experience was actually in the, one of the first experiences, actually in the part of a gym facility they had there for cardiac rehab. And so basically what you're allowed to teach them is stretching.
Yeah.
And the stretching is helpful. And all the techniques are helpful. We do some stretching and some breathing. So it really just expanded from that. And adding things as I went along. And then when we moved to Brazil, we had more scope to bring into the medical system what we wanted to bring in. And so
Mm.
that's when I really started to reflect, well, what is it that heals? What is it that heals his people? And is yoga therapy techniques, or is it more than techniques? And what part of the healing is techniques, and what part of this healing is some other kind of process?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I started to reflect on this whole, and I gave the names absolute and relative yoga therapy. So
Yes.
relative yoga therapy for the techniques, and absolute yoga therapy really for the process of what happens to the person. And then how do I take that deeper, if you want to call it a spiritual process, and bring that into healthcare settings? These tend to be extremely conservative environments, not so much because of the patients, but because of the focus on the scientific method, the scientific model, and also that it should be a secular model.
Right.
Yet yoga also has a method. It also has a model. And it's certainly not religious in any way. But this transformation of the person, this change of vision, this change of perspective is really essential to health within yoga.
Yeah.
And so then the question comes in, well, how do I bring in all of these different pieces? And so we've been giving that program about 20 years. And so it's had a lot of time to evolve. And a lot of that is just hours and hours and hours of sitting in those rooms.
Yeah.
In their parish halls, their community centers. Sometimes they're heated, sometimes they're not heated, sometimes they're dusty, sometimes they get clean, sometimes they don't get clean. And so there's this whole thing we're working with. And interestingly, I find it not so different in the United States. The whole infrastructure problems, budgeting problems, and in some cases, I'm surprised to see them even more critical sometimes than in Brazil. So it's all those hundreds and hundreds of hours of sitting with people who've never done yoga.
Yeah.
And they come in and they're there because basically the medical systems, they don't know exactly what to do with these people. They know that there's some kind of stress. And so let's send them to the yoga therapy. So a lot of these people, some of them, they're not even sure what yoga is when they're sent there. And so they come into the class, and then here I am with my notions about yoga can't just be stretching, it can't just be breathing. And then here are these folks some of them never really heard what yoga is. And some of them because some elderly, and they're because basically the doctor or the nurse has recommended to them, okay, I'll give it a try.
Yeah.
And then the logic, as I've seen, not everywhere, would be, well, since these people have never practiced yoga before, let's introduce them to the lowest common denominator. Let's just teach them some stretching and see how that works. And so I started out that way. And then what experience taught me over 20 years is that just the opposite is true. That these people are very capable. And not only are they capable of understanding the concepts, but that these concepts are universal. And also that the techniques and the transformation that happens through this change of perspective, it's a change of perspective about themselves, about health, about life, about other people, about their interactions. So all of that really becomes one thing. And so absolutely no way of taking this concept of health and separating it out and just saying, well, you're sick and this is what we can do for you. So the medical world is so good at saying, well, this is the best we can give for you. This is what we assess that you have. But then where did this problem come from? What are its causes? And that's where it becomes vague. And oftentimes they'll just say, we don't know. Where does this cancer come from? Well, there could be a factor of diet. There could be this. There could be that. So a whole process has come into play. And then from the yoga perspective, there's going to need to be a process. So a process from the yoga perspective is the way of seeing themselves, of seeing the world, of seeing their own health. That process has, in a certain way, not created the disease, but certainly created the conditions for it to take place. Mm-hmm. And then to bring those people to health, my perspective is that also needs to be a process. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so then we started working with these processes. What are the processes of health? And that's where I came up with the idea of having the multiple weeks. Mm-hmm. And so in each week presenting a theme, and in each week, that person in a certain way being asked to look at themselves, to look at their health in a new way.
Yeah.
So instead of thinking of each week, well, this week I learned this posture, and that week I learned this posture, and that's included. So each week does have new techniques, but each week is also, I learned to see my health in a new way. Mm-hmm. I learned to see my posture in a new way. Mm-hmm. I learned to see my breath in a new way. I learned to see my daily routine in a new way. So I learned to see my energy, the energy in my body in a new way. I learned to see my relationships in a new way. And so that was the idea, that what these people really needed to become healthy was this combination of the techniques, what we call the relative yoga therapy, and this change of vision that I call the absolute yoga therapy. Mm-hmm. And so within yoga, that change of vision would be called enlightenment, but we don't need any kind of words like that. We can call it holistic health, mm-hmm. a way of seeing their health as one whole that has to do with their body, it has to do with their mind, it has to do with the way they see life, it has to do with their beliefs, and it has to do with their ability to see that I can actually make changes in myself. I can make changes in my life. I can make changes in the way I see the world. And for me, who taught, I'm going to call it stretching, even though the poses had names. But for the medical community, at least for a lot of them, and it's not universally true, but that's what the yoga was. Mm-hmm. These people will stretch and they'll get out some of that muscle tension, and then they'll relax a little bit, and all that is good. And the results of this Healthy Heart program are something very different.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a bit about some of the successes that you've seen through the implementation of the program over these many years.
Yeah. One thing is that at the end of each session along the year, we have everyone come to our center here. Mm-hmm. And so it's more than 100 people. Right now, we have different teachers who teach these classes. And then all of these people come here from different communities, mm-hmm. and they're all in there together. And it's the most amazing thing you've ever seen, mm-hmm. where people are just talking about how their lives have been completely transformed. Mm-hmm. And so one thing you see is that people have been given a voice.
Yeah.
A lot of these people from rural communities, almost all from Catholic communities or evangelical communities. Mm-hmm. And instances where people felt threatened in any way, or that the yoga was religious or anything like that, it's happened, but it's been 1 in 1,000. Mm-hmm. So these people have not experienced anything that they experienced as shocking with their culture or their values coming from rural Christian communities. And what they come here and relate is, oh yeah, my blood pressure went down. Oh, that was great. The blood pressure went down, and I have less digestive problems. I have less headache. I have less anxiety. My depression is better. So those are the things we hear most frequently.
And you measure those things too, don't you?
We have a questionnaire. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a questionnaire we give at the beginning, at the end. And it does show consistent results mm-hmm. in those areas where digestive problems, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, headache, insomnia, depression, anxiety. Those are the most common things we see. And then as people come here, what's so interesting is my life has been completely changed.
Yeah.
So and to see 100 people, and mostly, age 50 to 80, and at a time where a lot of people would say, well, this would be the time when, in a certain way, to hold on to all of those perspectives and ways of seeing others in the world and yourself, to see how that program has changed their vision of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what they say universally, I'm so much happier. I feel so much freer. I feel so much lighter. I feel so much more contented in life.
Mm-hmm.
My relationships are better. I'm able to talk to my husband and my kids in a different way. I see meaning in life that I didn't see before.
That's huge. Yeah.
And so if I go back to my my first classes there at the cardiac rehab, and think about the progress over the 20 years, and also how I had to be creative and also respectful. And what those heart patients had in common with these people we're working with now is yoga, yogurt, what's that? And is this going to make me better? And doctor told me to be here. And then how to have gone from just teaching stretching to teaching this whole process of yoga. And in the end, sure, the people felt better after that stretching. Of course, those heart patients were highly competitive.
Sure.
What a lot of them really wanted was to show the other person they could learn the poses better.
Mm-hmm.
And to go from there to have these 100 people, and most of them crying.
Yeah.
And yet with no sense that, yes, we've become the disciples of this guru. Nothing that infringed on their culture, their religion, their values. And yet at the same time, they experienced themselves as completely transformed. Yeah. And keeping in mind that in a lot of these communities, the parish priest actually has to sign off on these programs.
Wow, how about that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that would happen in the United States.
Probably not.
The area. Probably depends on the area.
Yeah, but there'll be unique challenges in the US for sure, but I don't know that that's one of them. Mm-hmm. Maybe talk a little bit more about some of the challenges you've encountered, because we're going to teach this here in a couple of weeks, and our vision is to see this implemented across the US and helping individual yoga therapists navigate that too, and demonstrate some case studies. But you must have encountered some challenges along the way.
Well, I think with every week, we ask ourselves, is it going to be true to yoga? And we make it really appropriate for these people's lives.
Yeah.
Both. So we take something like the chakras, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So things that are basic for yoga and health, that for the systems to be functioning optimally, there needs to be energy in those parts of the body. So how do we explain that in a way that's helpful?
Yeah.
So we don't use the word chakras, don't chant Om, don't do any of these things. And then one thing that can come in that's interesting, as you're teaching all that, then one of the students will say, well, aren't those the chakras?
Yeah.
I saw those chakras on television. We're not going to say, oh, but we don't use the word chakras here. And so then we say, yes, these are the chakras, the energy centers. So everything that we bring in, we have that challenge of how do we make it authentic in the sense that it does what we would like it to do, and we still want to keep it in a way that they can understand it. So the same thing with Ayurveda. So how do we bring those concepts in a way that we're not talking about Indian medicine, and at the same way we're true to it? We can say that people are different. Their lifestyles are different. The way they sleep is different. What they need to eat is different. Their levels of energy is different. So talking about just general groups, and you won't fall into one exclusively, But if you can find these different aspects of your body, mind, and find what would be helpful for you. So that's the way we can bring in the Ayurveda. Mm-hmm. And as we go through the weeks, we start with what is easiest, and we start to build trust. So a new vision of health, that you have a role in your own health. And health is not something that's going to come exclusively from the outside, but it's going to come both through the medical community. And of course, the medical practitioners are there in the room, either nurse or doctor. And so that's an issue that we have to be very careful to respect their work and promote their work. And the one thing that I've learned in working with them for more than 20 years here is just how dedicated and hardworking most of them are. And I put in a special note for the nurses there, because the nurses just do a lot of work. And unlike the doctors, at least in Brazil, don't have the same autonomy and don't always receive the same credit. And of course, not the same salaries either, but they have tremendous responsibilities. Yeah. So they're there in the room. So we're talking about these yoga concepts, and it has to be comfortable not only for the students, but it has to be comfortable for these medical practitioners also. Right. Because they're the ones who are going to be saying, well, does this really fit in with what we're doing? So it's something that has to make sense to everyone. So as we're presenting these concepts, we have to be true to yoga on one hand. We have to be true to the needs of our patients. And we have to be true to the medical community that's sitting there. And in a certain way, it's with their permission that we're doing this program. Yeah. And so that's a challenge. And then another challenge in all of this is funding. Yeah. You know, where do we get the money? Here in Brazil, what we found is that the city governments, a lot of them do have funds for public health, and a certain part of it is discretionary. So how do you find the right person to ask for the money? That's critical. Yeah. And then to what point is it helpful to give a sample program first and then try to find the money? And then what is the structure of funds for public health if you're going to do it in a public health setting within your particular community? And who holds those purse strings? Yeah. And how to get in and talk to that person? So all of those are pretty key. And interestingly enough, one of our strongest allies here in Brazil has been contacting the wives of the mayors. Huh. How about that? These are small towns. Yeah. Yeah. Not like you're going to get an appointment for the wife of the mayor in New York, but maybe in what's the city where you live? Durango. Maybe in Durango. Maybe. Yeah. And then find out that she actually does some yoga. So maybe the husband of the mayor in Durango. Yeah. Either way. And so there's so many different ways to look for funding. And then is it going to be done through public health, or is it going to be done through the private sector? And there's this whole thing about testing and standards and evaluation. And the difference between, for example, evaluation and research. And then how could you take that evaluation and eventually channel it into research? And so we've been working with these questionnaires. And so the questionnaires are extensive on all, we use this 5 kosha model, all aspects of the person's health, their diet, their level of energy, their sleep, their breathing, their emotional states, their relationships. And then along with that, we're doing blood pressure and also blood sugar. So that evaluation, we have looked at standard evaluation tools, but we haven't found anything that really works for us. So we created our own evaluation tool. And within the framework of this program, it allows us to compare one program to another, one community to another, one teacher to another. And so evaluation, standards, money, working with the medical community, respecting the norms and values of the community you work in. And then when you go to put all of those together, and if it looks like a big job, that's because it is.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, we have this International Association of Yoga Therapists, and we have these 800-hour standards. And so my question is, do you really need 800 hours to teach stretching?
Right. You don't.
And do you need 800 hours, or do you need some pretty, well, let's say, do you need at least a commitment to some in-depth training in yoga therapy to be able to teach something like the Healthy Heart Program? And the answer is yes. What I would say, if you're going to do this training, that the level of work you're going to do at the end, it should be up to the standard of the training you've been given. And so if in this, for example, in this Healthy Heart Program, one part of it is education. One part of every week is education. So the teacher has to get up there and speak about health, speak about the breath, speak about posture. And that's where all of this in-depth training in yoga and yoga therapy comes in. And work as a healthcare professional, work as a yoga teacher, work as a yoga therapist, all the other courses that we do, that's what's going to allow us to go in and say, well, let me talk to you about the circulatory system and your heart and the effects of stress. And I don't want to be reading that from a paper. Of course, the people who do teach our Healthy Heart Program, they have these scripts. But basically what they want to do is have that knowledge deep enough and be prepared enough so that when they go in there, it can be more like a conversation with these people and not reading a script. So it takes a pretty extensive level of knowledge. And then the other thing is that every week includes an interaction. So where, for example, let's say, just to give an example, I know we did in one of our classes, the students draw their heart. And then they draw some of their feelings there and what they experience within their heart. So this, of course, is in one of the later weeks. But to be able to be the person who integrates this whole process in a way that all of the students can share with each other and then can share with the group, that takes considerable knowledge and understanding way beyond just stretching. And so the Healthy Heart Program asks the teachers to be able to explain all of these concepts of health, to be able to explain all of these different concepts of yoga in a way that this group of people with no prior experience can understand, to be able to explain them in a way that the health professionals there are going to go, that'll be healthy, that'll be good for them. And then to find a way so that people, rather than receiving information, they have a chance to speak. So what they do, once they've drawn, we've got this map of the heart, and once they've drawn that, then they're going to share that with their neighbor, usually sitting around in a circle. And then depending on the group, then sometimes they'll share that within the whole group. And sometimes they'll take a couple of minutes to share everything about that heart with their neighbor. Maybe we'll just go around in the circle and just say one quality that you love about your own heart. So everyone just shows their heart and shares that quality. So this is bringing in a whole dynamic. And then once we've set the stage, once we've set that theme, then all of the different techniques, they follow that. So we're going to have a breath technique, and our breath technique for that week focused on the heart, it's going to be called the heart breath, where they bring their hands up and they form a heart as they breathe. And then when we go into then we'll create an affirmation. My heart is open and loving. We'll use a gesture to support that. We'll use this gesture of the lotus, for example, where we hold the hands in front of the heart in a lotus gesture. And then we go into the asanas, and all of the asanas, mostly chair yoga, all of the asanas that week will all support that theme. Mm-hmm. And then we go into our relaxation. The relaxation will all be about the heart. And then finally, we'll have a meditation on the heart. And then we'll have a sharing. Mm-hmm. So to bring this whole process together, that's what we've done for the last 20 years.
It's amazing.
It's become such a seamless process that in the end, we do get that experience of 100 people at the end of the year crying and saying, this thing has completely changed my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. So in our upcoming course together, essentially, you're going to walk us through what happens in the program, right? How it's structured, what the themes are, the techniques that come into play. Give us an experience of the class itself, and also empower the trainees who are studying with you to take this and implement it at their local level. And I think some of the things that you mentioned about the challenges and the way to navigate how to bring this in at the local level makes sense here in the US too. In fact, I do live in Durango, Colorado, and anything that I've been able to do within a funded or grant type of yoga position has happened at the local level. And I have quite a bit of it happening now. It feels like it is a grassroots effort here too. And our hope is that we can offer the material, what you've cultivated, what you've refined through many, many years, put it in the hands of yoga therapists and yoga teachers here and empower them to take it. And there may need to be some modification. A 12-week course may not be realistic. Maybe it's going to have to be 6 or 8 or 10, right? And what can we combine? And that's what we've seen through some of the folks here that have taken this program and worked to bring it to their healthcare system. There has to be some modifications and adaptations, and that just might be the reality. But the framework, the model, and all of the materials and support for it are in place, and that's what you plan to share.
That's it. The other thing that we'll be doing is looking at the foundations for each week.
Right.
What is the stress response? What is health? What is therapy? What are these different facets of yoga therapy? Mm-hmm. So each week we'll be looking at some of these foundations for what are the levels of information, the kinds of information that we need to teach each week.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. And so just to put in a little spot for the course, we're starting on Tuesday, September 24th, so a couple of weeks from now. And it's a 12-week course. We're meeting for 3 hours each week. So it's 36 hours total. We're meeting on Tuesday mornings. However, it is going to be recorded in case folks cannot attend live. It's virtual, of course, since you're in Brazil and we're here in the US. And we would encourage folks to reach out or sign up if this sounds like the right course for you and what you're excited about or see yourself doing in your local community. Anything else you want to share with us today, Joseph?
Yeah, I have my little talking point that at this point, I think that sometimes we can be a little bit shy about yoga. And I would say that given the environmental situation in the world, given the focus placed on consumerism, given what that's doing to the environment, given the polarization in all our economies and all our societies, given the level of violence in our societies, that I would say that for yoga and yoga therapy, we want to be respectful, but it seems like it's almost the time to take out the pots and pans and start banging on them.
Yeah.
And to say that now's the time to say that all of communities, along with the healthcare, there also needs to be a focus on wellness for our societies, our communities to move forward.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Joseph. I'm really excited about the course, and it's always just so lovely to speak with you. Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste. If you'd like to learn more about who we are and what we do, visit us at innerpeaceyogatherapy.com.